welcome to Psychopath in Your Life. I'm your host, Dianne Emerson. This is episode number 7. And today we will be doing an audio only. We have been uploading our video to Facebook and YouTube, but today will be audio only. Full confession here, I am very technologically challenged. So we will return to video next week for episode 8, but for today we will be audio only. And I appreciate you joining us, and if I could ask you to be so kind to subscribe, that would really help out so I know that you're out there. And I'll be giving contact information at the end of the show. So let's get started on today's show. Okay, we had some really interesting news this week. The Atlantic magazine just came out with a new article that I'd like to talk about a little bit today to further our conversation. We were talking about the RAD and the conduct disorder in children. Why bring up kids again? Well, because this is really important. I mean, we're finally getting some information coming out, and that is a big move. I think we're starting to figure out more about kids who are addicted to gaming than we are about kids who could possibly have conduct disorder and budding psychopathic traits. The Atlantic magazine is a great article, and the title is When Your Child is a Psychopath. And I will put the notes down, the show notes down below, or it'd be very easy to find on Google. And what the writer did was a very good job of going through the history and some of the details. And interestingly enough, when I was doing some Google searches for keywords for the podcast and whatnot, RAD actually comes up pretty high in the listing for things that people are searching for. So it's an evolving topic that I feel encouraged by because, information is definitely power. So I'd like to read a few things here for you. What they're talking about, just to recap, is callous and unemotional traits. They're shorthand for a cluster of characteristics and behaviors, including a lack of empathy, remorse or guilt, shallow emotions, aggression, and even cruelty. And a seemingly indifference to punishment. That's where some of the RAD treatments really go off the rails. In that, I mean that the treatment recommendations are timeouts, hug them more, and all of that. But the only thing they're seeming to find is some of the reward systems are working. The callous and unemotional children have no trouble hurting others to get what they want. If they do seem caring or empathetic, they're probably trying to manipulate you. And it's only been since 2013 that the American Psychiatric Association in the DSM-5, which I gave the description to a couple episodes ago, that's the diagnostic manual for people in the psychiatric world. What they say, which is, here's the key here. The condition can go unnoticed because many children with these traits, who can be charming and smart enough to mimic social cues, are able to mask them. Optimum level of psychological arousal. And psychopathic people seek out stimulation that helps with the heart. So what happens is that what you'll start to see first in some of these kids is instant gratifications for things. Some way they get around is by shoplifting, joining gangs, robbing stores, getting into fights, doing clever, not clever in a good way, but evil things behind the scenes to other siblings in the family. So what they're trying to do, and this is so new, because if you figure 2013, that was just a few years ago, and Dr. Robert Hare, which you could find at Hare, HARE.org, developed the youth checklist for psychopathic behaviors. And that ranges from 12 to 18. Now, here's the deal, though. As much as they're trying to get research out there, what everything is being done now is really by trial and error. And what the general thinking is that if they can't cure them, they will try to at least learn to put the brakes on. So anyway, the real flaw that I saw in this situation is that they did start developing places to have for these kids to go to that weren't correctional facilities to try to start to modify behaviors. The theory being they wanted to, they very well recognize that they will be teaching them how to use a pen versus a gun in their interactions in society, but that's probably as good as it's going to get, sadly. So anyway, so what they have found though in the cognitive is that the moral conscience is that the kids have, and they say, well, how many kids can stay the course for a lifetime? Well, they really don't know. And they're because once they, well, I'll get into how complex it is to get a child into these facilities. Number one, that's a road uphill that keeps going and never seems to level off. But what happens is that once they age out of these facilities at 18, there's no follow-up. Why? Well, it's a boundary issue between the facilities and the child. So you start to see how this can become more complicated because, first of all, you're relying on a lot of self-reporting from the family to identify these patterns. Then you're relying on the family to try to seek help, and that's a battle that is a huge undertaking because as a parent, you'll be scrutinized, you'll be looked at as your fault. You had these issues and you probably didn't do the right thing by this child, and so somehow it'll all come back to you. So very few families actually get to the point where they can actually find a care facility. There's all kinds of insurance issues. I was watching this 2020 show or one of those shows, and they were talking about this new gaming addiction. Well, they're starting to do brain studies. Well, they've done brain studies on kids. I mean, a lot of the stuff you can take and kind of short circuit some of your own research because they know by looking at the brain, there's different reward centers. And for example, in China, there are actually tons of facilities where kids could go to help cure their gaming addictions. Unfortunately, in the world of RAD and conduct disorder, early psychopathic children, we're miles behind, but hopefully slowly catching up. And what I'd like to say at this point is that so research and self-reporting become a key issue, and it's all over the map. Last week I was reading somewhere that they're doing a new Ted Bundy movie. Well, okay, that's great, but let's hope that they dig into his past and show the real elements of his childhood. But instead, it's going to be the story about his one girlfriend that he was with for like 7 years, even during the time that he was on the killing sprees, and she knew it and had suspicions. But anyway, so unfortunately, it doesn't look like they're going to talk about the family. But from what I've read, and here's where the self-reporting comes in. From what I've read in the Bundy case, is that his mother was an unwed mother, which, in the late 40s or early 50s was kind of a taboo kind of a thing. And she was shipped off. And then when she came back with Ted, the grandparents, her parents, took him over, and he grew up thinking his mother was his sister. Well, there's allegations or suspicions out there that he got the gene, that he was his grandfather's child. So in other words, there was some incest involved there. And so you start to look at the patterns of the grandfather. Well, the grandfather beat the kids unmercifully, threw one of the sisters down the stairs, was basically described as a pretty evil guy. But then, so here we go into the self-reporting. I was then watching Ted Bundy's last interview, what he did with that Dr. Dobson, who's the religious guy. And Ted, it was a fascinating interview to watch. You can find it on YouTube. Just do a search for Ted Bundy's last interview. And what was interesting about it was a picture that he painted of his childhood. And what he painted of his childhood was this wonderful middle-class home where everything was great, and the big trip up to him was pornography. And that was the root cause of all of his issues. Well, I don't, necessarily advocate for pornography, but what you do in your own home is your own business. But I think his issues were much deeper than that. But you see how people start to minimize. His family rose and were at his trial and claiming his innocence. Even it's interesting because I find the people around these people as fascinating as the actual subjects. And here's why. The girlfriend stayed with him for years, and she was only kind of forced into turning him in when her friend was pushing her, because he started to turn up looking like the sketch on the mug shots that they were doing. And remember, this is the early 70s, so it wasn't like they could really catch him real quickly with DNA. So it took a long process, and he eventually started to come under the radar, and then he went to another state, and then he escaped from there and went to Florida, where they finally did catch him, where he did use an old legal thing. He was a aspiring lawyer and married that was the first wife that he was married to. He was engaged a couple of times, but this first wife was the one he was married to. And she met him when he was in prison being on trial for all these gruesome deaths. And he did have a pattern. I mean, most of the women were long, dark hair, parted down the middle. But interestingly enough, the one woman who he didn't kill, who he was with for all those years, she didn't fit the profile of any of these women. But I don't think he was really that attracted to her. Maybe she was, I know he used her for a lot of money and stuff. The reporting becomes really complicated because you're relying on the family to report. And I went back and read a bunch of books that I'd read many years ago. And, the family has all kinds of different barriers set up. You have to almost look at things like a detective. And if you've got a child involved and you're trying to get a clear diagnosis or look at a situation, it becomes really complex because, is the family really telling you all the facts? Clearly, the psychopath is probably minimizing things. You probably won't find a lot of their behaviors on a checklist because they've excelled beyond the checklist. They've modified those behaviors to the point that they'll fit into society. So it becomes a very, very complicated issue indeed. And when you start bringing children into the equation, you get really even more clouded. And I wanted to follow up on one thing I mentioned a couple of episodes ago. I referred to a man being a psychopath and the woman being the victim. That's not always true. They don't know how many of them are out there, and because they blend in. So they don't know how many of them are men, how many of them are women. I've read some pretty compelling cases of women who are very educated and clearly psychopaths. So I think to a large degree, women, because the closest I can figure out is because we all had mothers. So there's a soft spot for women. For example, if you look at these cases of teachers abusing, having sex with young students, well, in most books, that would be considered pedophilia behavior, okay? If it was a man, the headlines would be pedophile attacks student. But if you're a woman, it's like, boy, that kid got lucky. So we really view women through another lens. And for example, why don't you go thumb through your phone book and see how many abuse shelters you'll find for men? You won't find any. Men who are abused by women are completely off the radar. And, it's pretty high incidence. I mean, I know personally of a few men, not friends of mine, but people who are abused by their spouses. And, when it comes time, if they do get up the courage to report them, the woman usually gets touted as a victim and the man is the perpetrator. So it becomes very complex. So I'd like to close for today. And if you'd like some more information, I do have my forum, which has been around for many years. And there's one person there, forums have really, gone to the wayside. That's the reason for the podcasts and the video clips. But I do have one parent still there looking for support. So if you could go to psychopath-research.com and go to the family section. If you'd like to register, I'm the only person who approves memberships. And the reason you want to register is because then you can post, and you also are able to, if you start reading things, the software will keep track of what you read last. And your information is confidential there. So I don't police it. The only reason I have to screen registrations is because of computer bots out of China or third world countries that try to do malware. I don't know, whatever they try to do. But so anyways, so we still have a person there posting who is a parent. And this person has really gone through it all. I mean, he has, worked to finally get this child in a care facility, which was a huge, huge struggle. There's other family members to be considered in the situation. He has valiantly stuck in there, and every 6 months, it's not like you send them to a care facility and wash your hands and they're done. Every 6 months, the behaviors become minimized by the reporters, and they keep trying to edge this kid back into your home, which could be a perilous thing for the rest of the family. So anyway, so let's wrap it up for today. And I did get a couple of emails that I'd like to address real quickly. People have asked me, they'll say things, they'll give me a description and say, do you think this person is a psychopath? Well, I don't really see my role here, and it'd be kind of irresponsible to start diagnosing people that I've never met or I'm not qualified for. The best thing you could do is to figure out a way to, and if you want me to help you with who to go to, like if I had a child I was concerned about, I'd go to a couple of experts who are trained with the Hare checklist to make sure you got the right analysis. The last thing you want to do is mislabel a child. I'm not able to answer those questions, but here's the thing. I'm really bad at slogans and quotes, but it's the old give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach him how to give a man a fish. Teach him how to fish, and he'll live forever, or whatever that one. You know what that one is. But anyway, so here's the goal here: is because so many of these behaviors you won't find on checklists. I'd like to keep talking to you about some of the things that they do, because you will then get the skills to know what to look for in your own life. That's the goal here, not for me to sit here and start saying, yeah, that person's a psychopath, or that politician certainly looks like a psychopath. Hey, I may have my own private thoughts. I mean, I'm only a person, but I'm not going to go on the internet and start declaring, people psychopaths. I would like to share with you tools so that you could be a better investigator in your own life. Learn to be in charge of those people around you. And if you have the tools, you are going to meet them. I mean, that's the sad reality of this whole thing. So you are going to meet them. So perhaps with the right tools, you will be able to you will be able to know how to deal with the situation. So anyway, so we are broadcasting on Tuesdays on iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Facebook, and my website. And you can contact me through the website. There's a confidential form there. And the website is the same title. It's psychopathinyourlife.com, same title of the show. Or you can email me at Dianne, Dianne, at Dianne Emerson, DianneEmerson.com. So for now, I'll look forward to seeing you next week, and be safe out there, and stop painting those red flags white, and let's keep talking. Thank you very much.